The homecoming Margaret Hayes had built her life carefully, brick by brick, over 32 years of marriage. She was 54 years old, a woman who wore her years with quiet dignity. Her deep brown skin glowed with health, and her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had weathered storms and celebrated sunshine. She worked as a senior financial consultant, traveling frequently to help businesses across the country stabilize their futures. This particular trip had lasted 2 weeks. 2 weeks of hotel rooms and client meetings, of takeout dinners and video calls home to her family. She missed them terribly. Her husband Richard, her 26-year-old son Marcus, and her younger sister Diane, who had been living with them for the past year after losing her job. Margaret loved coming home. She loved the way the house smelled, the familiar creak of the porch steps, the warmth that seemed to radiate from every corner. But this homecoming would be different. The taxi pulled up to the house just after 6 in the evening. Margaret paid the driver and stepped out, her small suitcase rolling behind her. The January air was crisp and cool against her face. She noticed immediately that all the cars were in the driveway. Richard's truck, Marcus's sedan, even Diane's little compact. Everyone was home. She smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Maybe they were planning a surprise welcome home dinner. Margaret opened the front door quietly, not wanting to spoil any potential surprise. The house was unusually silent. No television sounds, no music, no conversation drifting from the kitchen. Then, she heard voices, low voices, coming from the living room. She moved toward them, her footsteps soft on the carpet, and then she saw them, all of them. Richard, her husband of 3 decades, sitting in his favorite armchair. Marcus, their son, standing by the window. Diane, her sister, perched on the sofa arm. They were looking at something on Marcus's phone, their heads bent together. "Mom's going to be devastated," Diane was saying, her voice carrying a strange mixture of pity and something else Margaret couldn't quite identify. "She needs to know," Richard said, and his voice sounded different, lighter somehow, unburdened. Margaret's heart began to pound. Marcus looked up and saw her standing in the doorway. His face went pale, then flushed red. He straightened immediately. "Mom," he said, and the word came out strangled. The others turned. Richard stood up slowly. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Margaret's suitcase was still in her hand, though she didn't remember picking it up. She stood there, waiting, feeling the ground beneath her beginning to shift. Marcus took a breath, his jaw tight. He was her baby, her only child, and she could see the struggle in his eyes. But there was also determination there, and something that looked like anger. He said again, more steadily this time. "Your time is over. Dad is happier with her now." The words hung in the air like smoke. Margaret heard them, understood them individually, but together they made no sense. She looked from Marcus to Richard to Diane, searching their faces for some explanation, some context that would make this moment something other than what it appeared to be. Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. Diane wouldn't meet her eyes. Richard looked down at his hands. Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength from some reservoir of conviction Margaret didn't understand. "Dad's been seeing someone who makes him happy. And you're always gone, Mom. You're always working, always traveling. What did you expect?" Margaret felt something crack deep inside her chest. She carefully set down her suitcase. Her hands were steady, even though her whole world was tilting sideways. "How long?" she asked, looking directly at Richard now. He shifted his weight, cleared his throat. "Margaret, how long?" 8 months, he said finally. Months. Margaret counted backward in her mind. Spring. He had started this in the spring, when the gardens were blooming, when she had taken on that extended project in Denver. "And you," she said, turning to Marcus, "you think this is acceptable? You think betrayal is something to celebrate?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I think Dad deserves to be happy. I think you made your choice when you chose your career over your family." The accusation stung precisely because there was a grain of truth in it. Margaret had worked hard, traveled frequently, built a successful career, but she had done it for them, for their future, For Marcus's college education and their comfortable home and their secure retirement, she looked at her sister. Diane finally met her eyes, and what Margaret saw there was worse than Richard's guilt or Marcus's misplaced righteousness. She saw satisfaction, enjoyment even. "I'm sorry, Margaret," Diane said, but her tone suggested she was anything but. Margaret nodded slowly. She understood now. This wasn't just about Richard's affair. This was an ambush, carefully planned and executed. They had been waiting for her, all of them together, united in their decision to cast her out of her own life. "I see," she said quietly. She picked up her suitcase. She walked past all of them, past the family photos on the walls, past the furniture she had chosen, past the memories of 3 decades. She walked up the stairs to the bedroom she had shared with Richard. She could hear them murmuring below, probably debating whether to follow her, what to say next. Margaret moved efficiently. She had traveled for work so often that packing had become second nature. She gathered clothes, toiletries, important documents. She took her jewelry, her grandmother's quilt, the photo albums from her childhood that her mother had given her. Before she passed, she left her wedding ring on Richard's dresser. She left the family photos where they were. She left without saying another word. Margaret checked into a hotel downtown. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a long time. Then she did what she always did when life became overwhelming. She made a plan. She opened her laptop and began making calls. Within 3 days, she had done several things. She had hired a divorce attorney, one of the best in the state. She had contacted a real estate agent. She had reviewed all their joint assets and accounts with ruthless clarity. She had also done something else, something that would take time to bear fruit, but would be, she thought, appropriately instructive. Margaret had built her career on financial consulting. She knew money, knew how it moved, knew how to protect it and how to trace it. She began by examining every joint account, every credit card statement, every investment. What she found was illuminating. Richard had been spending money freely. Gifts, dinners, hotel rooms, jewelry. All of it traceable, all of it documented. Under their prenuptial agreement, which they had signed 30 years ago at Margaret's insistence, infidelity had specific consequences. But there was more. Margaret discovered that Richard had been taking money from their joint business account, the one they used for household expenses. He had been moving it into a separate account, presumably for his new life. This, her attorney informed her with barely concealed glee, was a serious mistake. The next day, Margaret had 118 missed calls. She had blocked Richard's number that first night. She had blocked Marcus's too, though that had hurt more than she wanted to admit. She had blocked Diane's, but apparently they had been calling all night, leaving voicemails, sending texts that piled up unread. When she finally unblocked Richard's number briefly to check the messages, they were panicked. "Margaret, please call me back. We need to talk about this. Don't do anything rash. Margaret, please, we can work this out." She deleted them all and blocked the number again. Marcus showed up at her hotel on day 5. The front desk called up, and Margaret surprised herself by agreeing to see him. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usually neat appearance disheveled. He stood in her hotel room doorway, and for a moment, he looked like the little boy he used to be, the one who would come to her room after a nightmare. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked. Margaret gestured to the chair by the window. She sat on the bed, maintaining distance between them. Marcus sat, his hands clasped between his knees. "I messed up," he said finally. "I messed up so bad." Margaret waited. "Dad's girlfriend," Marcus continued, the words coming out in a rush now. "She's pregnant. He just told me yesterday. He's known for a month, and he didn't tell me. And the money, Mom? He's been taking money from the household account. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Margaret's face remained impassive, though inside, something twisted sharply. Pregnant. Richard was going to be a father again at 57 years old. "I thought," Marcus said, and now, there were tears on his face. "I thought Dad was just unhappy. I thought you were never home and he was lonely, and I thought, I don't know what I thought, but he lied to me." He's been lying to all of us. And Aunt Diane knew. She knew everything, Mom. She's been encouraging him, telling him he deserves better. Why are you telling me this? Margaret asked, her voice calm. Marcus looked up at her, desperate. Because I was wrong. Because you're my mother, and I stood there and told you your time was over, and I've never said anything so cruel in my life. Because I'm so sorry. Margaret studied her son's face. She could see the genuine remorse there, the horror at what he had done and said. She could also see the little boy who used to bring her dandelions from the yard, who used to read her his stories, who used to tell her she was the smartest person he knew. I'm Margaret Santos, and I've learned that sometimes the cruelest betrayals come wrapped in the gentlest hands. That evening in November, I was preparing our family's favorite meal, chicken parmesan with garlic bread. The kitchen smelled of oregano and melting cheese. My daughter Zoe, only 7 years old, came padding into the kitchen in her purple pajamas, her braids slightly messy from playing. She tugged on my robe, her small fingers gripping the fabric with unusual urgency. Mom, she said, her voice soft and innocent. Can I stop taking the pills Aunt Diane gave me? The wooden spoon in my hand clattered against the counter. My blood ran cold. I knelt down to her level, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to frighten her with the panic rising in my chest. Sweetheart, I said, smoothing her hair gently. What pills are you talking about? The orange ones, Zoe said, pulling a small amber bottle from her pajama pocket. Aunt Diane said they were vitamins, but they make my tummy feel funny. My hands trembled as I took the bottle. And a label. No prescription, just small orange tablets rattling inside. Diane, my husband Robert's sister, the woman who had been staying with us for 3 months while she got back on her feet after her divorce. The woman I had welcomed into our home with open arms. Go watch your cartoons, baby, told Zoe, kissing her forehead. And don't take any more of these, okay? Not until Mommy says so. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at that bottle. Something felt terribly wrong. I called my friend Patricia, a pharmacist at the local hospital. Pat, I need you to do me a favor, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. No questions right now. I need you to analyze something for me. Tonight, if possible. The next morning, Patricia called me at work. I stepped into the stairwell to take the call, my heart pounding against my ribs. Margaret, she said, her voice grave. Where did you get these? Just tell me what they are. There was a long pause. They're fertility suppressants, Patricia said slowly. High-dose hormone disruptors. Margaret, these aren't vitamins. Someone's been trying to make sure your daughter couldn't have children someday. At her age, this could cause permanent damage. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. The stairwell walls seemed to close in around me. How long? I managed to ask. Based on the dose and your daughter's weight, if she's been taking these regularly for more than a few weeks, there could already be significant harm. You need to get her to a doctor immediately. I drove home in a daze. When I arrived, Diane was in the kitchen, humming as she prepared lunch. Wearing one of my aprons, she looked up with that warm smile I had trusted for months. Margaret, you're home early. Is everything all right? I set my purse down carefully on the counter. Diane, I said, my voice remarkably calm. Where did you get those orange pills you've been giving Zoe? Her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Pills? Oh, those were just children's vitamins. From the health food store. Why? Which store? I don't remember the name. Why are you asking me this? I pulled the bottle from my purse and placed it on the counter between us. These aren't vitamins, Diane. These are drugs that could have destroyed my daughter's future permanently. The color drained from her face. For a moment, we stood in silence, the clock on the wall ticking steadily. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Don't lie to me, said, my voice rising now. Not anymore. Why? Why would you do this to Zoe? To an innocent child? Diane's eyes filled with tears, but something harder flickered behind them. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. You have everything. The perfect husband, the perfect daughter, the perfect life. Do you know what it's like to watch that every day when you have nothing? So you decided to poison my child? I wasn't trying to poison her, Diane shouted. I just wanted to level the playing field a little. You already have your perfect daughter. You don't need the possibility of more grandchildren someday. You don't need everything while I have nothing. I stared at her, this woman I had considered family. Get out, I said quietly. Margaret, get out of my house. Now, before I call the police. You wouldn't. Robert would never forgive you. I'm his sister. I picked up my phone. Try me. Diane left that afternoon, but the damage was done. The doctors confirmed that Zoe had suffered some hormonal disruption, though the full extent wouldn't be known for years. She would need regular monitoring, possibly treatment as she grew older. When Robert came home from his business trip, I told him everything. He sat at our kitchen table, his head in his hand, torn between his loyalty to his sister and his love for his daughter. She's sick, Margaret, he said finally. She needs help, not prosecution. She poisoned our daughter. I know, but she's still my sister. Can't we just get her into therapy? Get her the help she needs? I looked at my husband, this man I had loved for 12 years. You're asking me to let this go? I'm asking you to show mercy for me. That night, lying in bed next to him, I realized something had broken between us that might never fully heal. His sister had tried to destroy our daughter's future, and he was asking me to show mercy. I did report Diane to the authorities, but without her confession, which she refused to give, and with Robert unwilling to support legal action, the case went nowhere. Diane moved across the country to live with her mother. But I made sure every member of Robert's family knew exactly what she had done. I sent them copies of the lab reports, the doctor's findings, everything. Some believed me, some didn't. Robert's mother stopped speaking to me for 2 years. 5 years have passed now. Zoe is 12, healthy and vibrant, though we still see specialists twice a year. The doctors are cautiously optimistic about her long-term health, but we won't know for certain until she's older. Robert and I are still together, though our marriage bears the scars of that terrible revelation. We rebuilt our trust slowly, brick by painful brick, through counseling and many difficult conversations. He eventually acknowledged that his first instinct to protect his sister over our daughter was wrong. But forgiveness is a process, not an event. Diane sent a letter last year. No apology, just excuses and justifications. I burned it without reading past the first paragraph. I've learned that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers or enemies. Sometimes it comes from the people sitting at your dinner table, sleeping in your guest room, kissing your daughter goodnight. I've learned that kindness without boundaries is dangerous, and I've learned that a mother's first duty is always to protect her children, even when it costs her everything else. That little amber bottle sits in a locked drawer in my bedroom, a reminder of how close we came to losing something precious, a reminder that evil sometimes wears a familiar face and speaks with a loving voice, but mostly, it reminds me that I was strong enough to fight back, and that's a kind of strength I hope I never have to use again.